An original podcast from podlatino.com.
There are images you don't forget, not because they're beautiful, but because they contain something the mind can't quite finish processing. The video runs 4 minutes and 14 seconds. In it, a young woman enters an elevator, presses several buttons, and then does things that no one has been able to explain satisfactorily. That video has been watched by more than 100 million people around the world. It is still being analyzed. It still generates questions. And the person in it died before anyone could ask her what was happening. The case of Elisa Lam began on January 26, 2013, when she checked into the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. She was 21 years old. She was Canadian, the daughter of immigrants from Hong Kong, and a literature student at the University of British Columbia. She had set out alone to travel up the west coast of the United States, a trip that up to that point had been exactly what she had hoped for, new, bright, and entirely her own. San Diego had been the first stop, then San Francisco. Los Angeles was next on her itinerary. On her Tumblr blog, which she updated often, Elisa wrote about books, about the weight of difficult days, about the joy of good ones. She had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and spoke about it with an honesty that many of her readers found courageous. She was on medication. She had learned to live alongside the cycles of her mind. The West Coast trip was, in part, a celebration of that, of being able to go out into the world alone and find it livable. The Cecil Hotel was not the kind of place anyone would choose if they had other options. Opened in 1927 in downtown Los Angeles, it had been built as an upscale establishment with marble lobbies, 600 rooms, and a clientele of businessmen arriving by train from the East Coast. But the neighborhood changed. The economic depression of the 1930s began to transform South Park into something else entirely. The post-war years finished the job. By the second half of the 20th century, the Cecil was a low-end hotel in a part of the city that most Angelenos preferred not to mention. The history the building had accumulated over those decades was the history of a place where people arrived when they had nowhere else to go. Some found a temporary refuge, others found an end. There were suicides. One in 1962 ended with a woman falling from the 9th floor onto a man walking on the sidewalk below. Both died. There were unexplained deaths, bodies found in locked rooms, people who checked in and never checked out. Richard Ramirez, the serial killer known as the Night Stalker, lived on the 14th floor of the Cecil while he murdered 13 people across Southern California between 1984 and 1985. Jack Unterweger, an Austrian writer who had been convicted of murder, released and reinvented as a journalist and cultural celebrity, stayed at the Cecil in 1991 while killing 3 women in Los Angeles. In the neighborhood for decades, everyone called it the same thing: the Death Hotel. At some point, management attempted a rebranding. They renamed it Stay on Main, as though words could erase what the walls had absorbed. The effort convinced no one who knew the history. Elisa Lam did not know the history. She booked one of the cheapest shared rooms because it was what she could afford, and downtown Los Angeles was where she wanted to be. The first few days at the hotel passed without any recorded incidents. Elisa explored the city. She visited the Last Bookstore, a multi-story bookshop housed in an old building a few blocks from the Cecil, and posted photos of the shelves, the staircases, and the light coming through the tall windows. She posted to her social media. She wrote on her blog. By everything she left behind, she appeared to be doing well. On January 31st, hotel management made a decision. They asked her to change rooms. Her roommates had filed complaints. Police reports, written weeks later, mention the incident without specifying the nature of the conflict. What exactly happened in that shared room is unknown. Elisa was moved to a private room on another floor. That evening, she spoke with her parents in Vancouver. It was the last time they heard from her. The following day, when they tried to call, the phone went unanswered. They waited. They called again. The silence continued for days until the family contacted the hotel contacted the police, and on February 1st, Elisa Lam was officially reported as a missing person. Investigators with the Los Angeles Police Department reviewed the building's security footage. They went floor by floor, camera by camera, looking for the last moment Elisa Lam had appeared on screen. They found it in the elevator of the East Wing. The recording was from the night of January 19th, just hours after she had checked in. In the video, Elisa enters the elevator. She presses several buttons, nearly every floor available. The doors don't close. She leans out into the hallway, looks left, steps back inside. She presses herself against the rear wall. She leans out again, this time looking right. She appears to hide inside the elevator, flush against the side wall, in the angle that would place her out of sight of anyone standing in the hallway. Then she steps out entirely and walks to the left. She comes back to the elevator door. She makes slow, deliberate movements with her hands and arms, fingers extended, wrists rotating. Some describe those gestures as those of someone in conversation with another person. Others interpreted them as the movements of someone in an altered state of consciousness. Then Elisa moves out of frame, walking left down the hallway. The elevator doors, which throughout the entire video had remained inexplicably open, finally close. The elevator rises on its own. Elisa Lam does not appear on any other camera in the building. The Los Angeles Police Department released the video on February 14, 2013, 19 days after Elisa had been reported missing. The release was a public appeal. If anyone recognized the person in the footage or had information about her whereabouts, they were asked to call. The video went viral within hours. In the days that followed, it was watched tens of millions of times. Internet forums filled with frame-by-frame analysis. Some counted the seconds between each of Elisa's movements. Others studied the shadows in the hallway, searching for the outline of someone else. Some pointed out that the elevator doors appeared to be responding to a presence the camera wasn't capturing. Some attributed what they saw to supernatural causes. Others constructed conspiracy theories. No one in any of those analyses arrived at a conclusion that accounted for everything the video showed. That same February 14th, while the video circulated around the world, guests at the Cecil began filing complaints about the water in their rooms. It had a dark color, an unusual consistency, a taste that some described as metallic and others simply as wrong. The pressure was irregular. Hotel staff went up to the roof to inspect the 4 water storage tanks that supplied the building. In the 3rd tank, they found the body of Elisa Lam. She was floating face up. She was unclothed. Her clothing, her room key card, and the rest of her belongings were inside the tank with her. The lid was closed. To access the roof of the Cecil Hotel, you had to pass through a door that required a key or force one that would trigger an alarm. There was no record that either had occurred during the days Elisa had been missing. The water tanks were metal cylinders roughly 8 feet tall, installed on the building's roof. Their lids opened from the outside. Closing them from the inside was physically possible, but required considerable effort and a level of coordination that is difficult to imagine in someone who had just entered the water. The autopsy was conducted by the Los Angeles County Department of Medical Examiner coroner. The cause of death was determined to be accidental drowning. Toxicological analysis found elevated concentrations of quetiapine, sertraline, and other compounds in her blood, all part of Elisa's prescribed treatment for bipolar disorder. The report noted that the levels were higher than expected for her prescribed dosage. No signs of physical violence were found on the body, no marks of struggle, no bruising, no injuries suggesting that Elisa had been overpowered by force. The case was classified as accidental death, and the criminal investigation was closed. Elisa's parents, Ming and Elisa Lam, filed a civil lawsuit against the Cecil Hotel, arguing that the conditions of the building had contributed to their daughter's death. The lawsuit was dismissed. The hotel, which had changed names and owners several times over the years, continued to operate. In 2021, Netflix released a 4-part documentary series titled Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. The production was watched by millions of people worldwide and sparked a new wave of analysis, theories, and debate. It interviewed investigators, people who had lived in the hotel at the time, mental health professionals, and internet researchers who had dedicated hundreds of hours to studying the case. By the end of 4 episodes, the questions were the same ones that had existed on the very first day. How Elisa Lam reached the roof without triggering the alarm or leaving any record of having used a key. How she got into a metal tank more than 8 feet tall. How the lid closed from the inside. Who she was speaking to, if she was speaking to anyone, in that elevator. Why the elevator doors remained open for so long with no apparent reason, and why they closed at the exact moment she was gone. The official investigation determined that those questions were irrelevant to establishing cause of death, that what mattered was the outcome, not the path. That Elisa Lam had drowned accidentally in a rooftop water tank at a hotel in downtown Los Angeles, and that was all the justice system needed to know. The case was closed in June 2013. Elisa Lam was 21 years old. The elevator video is still available online. It has been watched to date more than 100 million times. It is still being analyzed. It still generates theories. And the doors of that elevator with every playback still refuse to close when they should, and still close when there is no one left to wait for.